series. My name is Emily Hall, and I'm from SeaTech Environmental Association. I'm a conservation policy advocate there, and I will be moderating today's webinar. Just a little reminder for folks, if you're not familiar with what the Community Science LI webinar series is. Basically, it's a webinar series to highlight various community science opportunities around Long Island and how the data is accumulated by the public's influence of local environmental management efforts. The Community Science webinar series is brought to you by CTUC, the Long Island Sound Study, New York Sea Grant, the Peconic Estuary Partnership, and the South Shore Estuary Reserve. Just a little bit about us, if you're unfamiliar as well. CTUC is a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to conserving Long Island wildlife and the environment. Long Island Sound Study is a bi-state partnership consisting of federal and state agencies, user groups, concerned organizations dedicated to protecting the sound. New York Sea Grant represents a statewide effort of integrated research, education, and extension services promoting coastal community economic vitality, environmental sustainability, citizen awareness, and understanding about the state's marine and Great Lake resources. The Peconic Estuary Partnership is a national estuary program that works to protect and restore the Peconic Estuary. PEP staff and partners support monitoring, research, collaboration, and education across the estuary. And the South Shore Estuary Reserve guides the preservation, protection, and enhancement of the natural, recreational, economic, and educational resources of the estuary through various partnerships. We're very, very excited today to have tonight's webinar cover everything about sharks and local shark ecology, community science efforts around them, and we have some fantastic experts to join us tonight. Dr. Mary Camille from the Wildlife Conservation Society, Greg Metzger from the South Fork Natural History Museum and Nature Center, and Chris Scott from the New York Department of Environmental Conservation. So before we get started, I just wanted to go over a couple housekeeping notes. The webinar is being recorded and the recording will be available on CTUC's website shortly after the webinar concludes. We are also currently live on YouTube as well. Your video and microphones are turned off, but you are free to ask questions in the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen. If you don't have a question but want to share a resource or discuss amongst the group, you're more than welcome to use the chat box as well. All right, so thanks everyone again for joining us for the first webinar series back in the Community Science LI series. I'm really excited to talk about sharks. And I am now going to hand the presentation over to Dr. Mary Camille.
Okay. I'm going to share my screen. Can you hear me? And can you see my talk? Can you see? You can't see.
We can't see the presentation yet, but we can hear you.
Okay, let's see it. Let's see if this helps. Can you see it now?
No.
Okay, hold on one second. I have to get out of this whole thing. I'm going to end my slideshow and start. Oh,
okay. Well, we can see it now.
You can see it now. Okay, as long as you can see it now, I'm not going to touch anything else. Excellent. Okay, everybody. Hi. And I want to thank CTUC and all the other groups for inviting us here to talk about sharks. I've been working on sharks now since the early 90s. And I do lots of other things now. So I'm actually really excited to have an opportunity to talk about something that's super near and dear to my heart. I'm with the Wildlife Conservation Society, and briefly, if you guys don't know who the Wildlife Conservation Society is, you may know about the Bronx Zoo and the New York Aquarium in Coney Island. WCS is the overarching parent organization of the Bronx Zoo, New York Aquarium, but we also do conservation, field conservation all around the world. We work in 60 different countries, and in about 25 of them, we actually do marine conservation work, including right here in our own backyard, right here in the New York Seascape. So I am excited to tell you about some of that work, but I'm going to take a step back and start with a little bit about just sharks in general. And there's so much I could tell you about shark ecology and biology. I'm going to keep it really short and high level, but hopefully if you have any questions, we can get to them at the end. So want to tell you a little about sharky biology, ecology, why sharks matter, why they're in trouble. Then we'll zero in a little bit on sharks in New York waters, and then the work that Wildlife Conservation Society, the program that I do with the aquarium called the New York Seascape program, which is the marine conservation initiative of the New York Aquarium and the Wildlife Conservation Society, what we're doing and have been doing to promote shark conservation, both locally, nationally, and internationally. So sharks, people talk about sharks as if a shark is a shark. There are many, many, many different species of sharks. There are over 600, 500 species of sharks, and they're very close relatives, the skates and rays. You can kind of think of skates and rays almost as flattened sharks. They're very similar in ecology and biology. They just have different life forms. They belong to different taxonomic groups. But overall, there's about 1,200 species of sharks, and the skates and rays and sharks together, you might hear me call elasmobranchs. That's a commonly used term to refer to those two different groups. And you can see some of the images of the great amount of diversity in form, structure, color, etc. Below there. Now, sharks are, and when I say sharks, please also realize that I'm also talking about skates and rays. Sharks, skates, and rays are distributed globally. And you can get an idea here that they're in almost every habitat. And this is the distribution of those shark species across different habitats. They're in all the world's oceans, less so in the Antarctic, but we know that there are some sharks like Greenland sharks that can stand really cold waters in the Arctic. But a large number of our sharks are coastal sharks, but there are also very many deep water sharks. We even have some of those here in New York, including the chain dogfish. Now, you've probably heard that sharks are in trouble. And I like to say that sharks suffer from an identity complex. At once, they're one of the most feared and maligned of all animals groups, and yet they're also among the most biologically vulnerable. And the reason is because of their life history traits. So as a group, and realize because there's so many species, this varies tremendously from one species to the next. But as a group, sharks are very slow growing animals. They have a long life expectancy. Some can live 60, 70 years or longer. They can take a very long time to reach sexual maturity. So for example, a very common shark in our water, the spiny dogfish, can take up to 21 years to become mature. That's longer than the humans and elephants, right? And at the same time, they often have very low fecundity, right? So combining all these factors, these life history factors, we end up with animals that have a very low reproductive rate, okay? And what that means is that they are highly vulnerable. And if we're going to be exploiting shark populations for food, for fun, whatever it might be, we have to be really careful of how we manage them, because once their populations are depleted, it takes them a very long time to reach recovery. And one of the main reasons that sharks are in trouble is because of fishing. Okay, so for fishing, both targeted fishing for food, for fins, for meat, their gills, all kinds of products. They're some of the most versatile of all marine products, marine animals. And the bycatch, the incidental catch of sharks, is driving shark populations globally towards extinction. Now, I don't know if any of you have heard of the IUCN Red List. This is a global effort to track endangerment in wild plants and animals. And the Red List, a recent Red List study identified that of all the species, the 1,200 species, nearly a third of them are facing extinction. They're ranked as either vulnerable, threatened, or critically endangered. And so we know why this is the case. It's high fishing pressure and that life history combined that really is putting sharks in hot water. No pun intended, really. All right, so that gives you a very, very high level overview of shark ecology and biology. Now I'm going to take a step closer to right here in our own backyard, right? What you see as the background here is the New York Seascape. This is a map that actually WCS produced in conjunction with the with National Geographic Society. It is a double-sided map. that depicts how much and how diverse the life it is in our water. So the backside has all kinds of animals that occur in our water. In this side, it shows how busy our waters with human activities, right? So that's the context. This is where we're talking about as being our seascape, from Cape May, New Jersey to Montauk, New York, and Long Island Sound, from the edge of the continental shelf and all the way up into the tidal rivers. We have a pretty decent biodiversity of sharks right here. And more than 40 species of sharks, skates, and rays exist in our waters. And that includes some of the largest animals, vertebrates in the ocean, including basking sharks and whale sharks, some of the fastest going ocean predators like blue sharks and mako sharks, deep sea predators, and here's a chain dogfish that can live, thousands of feet below the surface. Some of them are really important to fisheries like thresher sharks and mako sharks. So a high diversity right here in our own backyard. Now, I know we've been hearing lots and lots lately about sharks in our waters, and we can talk probably a little bit later about why that's the case. But I want to put this in context. Sharks have lived in these waters long before we have inhabited Long Island or New York or New Jersey. All right, there have been sharks plying the seas for millennia. They're one of the oldest family taxonomic groups, being around for over 350 million years. And they've been using these waters for a very long time. Not only that, but even from historic perspectives, we have data from human history about shark presence. For example, we know that there are shark remains in the middens that were found by the Lenape used sharks, millennia ago. We also know that there have been sharks documented, for example, here in the Gowanus Canal back in the 1800s. And we know that in the early 1900s, William Beebe, one of the first explorers in New York and of the deep ocean, described sharks in the Hudson Canyon in this book right here called Arcturus Adventure, and wrote about it in the New York Times. He wrote a lot of popular articles to familiarize New Yorkers with the waters in their backyard. And then finally, I want to point out this image here of, I'm going to go back. This image here of, this is from Bayshore, the Shark Mako tournament. Years ago, Mako sharks were very plentiful. That whatever was caught was brought to the deck, to the docks, and then tossed into the garbage. About 10 years ago, the Mako tournament gave up on Makos and started introducing a bluefish category because it's gotten so difficult to find Makos here in our water due to heavy fishing pressure. And that brings me to this sobering slide that of the 40 species that we have here in New York, about 72 or so, almost 3/4 of them are facing some level of extinction. Now, it's important to recognize that in the US, we have some of the best shark fishery management in the world. And part of the reason why this number may be so high is because we have we know the populations, we know the status of them. And we also have been doing a lot to try to rein in fishing pressure and protect sharks. And we'll talk a little bit about that in just a bit. But my point here is that sharks need conservation attention. They need your and my attention and focus. So let me tell you briefly about the New York Aquarium shark work. We have been, the New York Seascape program began in about 2010, and shortly thereafter, we started doing some local shark work. Our shark work approaches, takes three different